Hey everyone, I'm here today with Josh Oliveri, who's an active police officer and a board member of Brothers Before Others, which is a 501c3 charity. He's awesome. And part of what we're doing with a guard is we're trying to bring on police officers, first responders, people who have inspiring stories. And Josh has become a friend of mine over some time now, as we've talked. And so I'd really love to have him on first to talk about his charity, what they're doing. I think it would just be great to inform all of you. And if you're looking for a police charity to support, he can give you all the details. So, Josh, thanks for being here. If you want to give a quick intro about yourself and then talk about the charity a little bit.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me here. Brothers Before Others. It's a registered 501c3. It's a national law enforcement charity. It's comprised solely of active duty or retired police officers. Um, Founded in 2014 by retired NYPD police officer Mike Burke. Initially, our goal when we started the charity, or I should say his goal, was to send a floral arrangement to every line of duty death, no matter where it happens in the country. Um, that's something that sounds so mundane to people. They think, oh, well, that's not that big of a deal. Well, reality, we're the only ones other than the New York Yankees that do something like that, and especially if you come from a bigger city, you tend to underestimate the value of the support structure that we have around us. If you're from a large department that's got tens of thousands of members, at these funerals you're going to have a large showing. Well, that's not always the case, and there have been times where our floral arrangements that have gone to these services have been among one of the only ones there, because again, it's just not every place is a big city.
Mm-hmm.
And it means a lot to something. As cops, we sign up for this job. Our families do not. So we sell them on the concept that this thing we do is a family. For them to end up receiving a floral arrangement from people that they've never met, that know nothing about them, it kind of reinforces that. So that was our initial goal when we started. Since then, we've grown well outside of that. If you go to our website, brothersbeforeothers.org, you could see all the stuff that we've been up to over the last 6 years. We take some crap sometimes about our name. People are like, "Oh, look at all you guys care about are cops." Well, I mean, the concept comes from when you say brothers before others, you say, okay, well, it's like when they tell you when you're on an airplane, then airplanes ever crashing, they always say, when the oxygen mask comes down, put it on yourself first, because if you can't take care of anybody else unless you take care of yourself first. And that's our concept. A healthy, happy, cared for cop is a more productive cop. And a productive cop is better for everybody, not just law enforcement. So
Yeah, I know
that's
you guys do a lot of incredible things, even for the community around you. It's not just like you said, you're taking care of each other, but when you guys aren't in direct need of the money at that time for yourselves, you start putting it toward other things, which is nice as well. Like whatever that may be, like connecting the community with police. I don't. You had said you
well,
guys.
it's crazy too when you see the benevolence that comes out of our members. Again, these are all cops, so, and everything we do, the vast majority of quote unquote fundraising, it all comes out of the cops' pockets. We have people from the outside that get involved once in a while, but a lot of it comes from our guys. And I mean, one of the biggest first like moves that we did outside of our circle was when Robert Godwin, remember, if you don't recall, the elderly gentleman that was shot in Cleveland. They think it was what the guy live streamed it on Facebook, I believe. Yeah, this is going back, I want to say maybe 2016, 17. And it was just a random crime, and this guy live streamed it on Facebook. He just drove up to this old man on the street and shot him live on Facebook. Um, our members, again, this is not a cop. That guy had nothing to do with law enforcement at all, but it gripped them so much that we felt like we had to do something,
Mhm.
and within 36 hours, we had $6,000 raised. We ended up Johnny Castro, who I know we've spoken about before. He's the Philadelphia police officer who also is their forensic sketch artist, who's been doing line of duty death portraits since 2016. He did a portrait of Mr. Godwin. We ended up making contact with the Cleveland PD. He had a couple of wives, so through their community affairs division, they identified which wife would be most in need of that money. And with his youngest kids, we went out there with the money for the wife, gifts for the kids, portrait that we had done. And that was like our first real outside of our circle move. And like I said, since then we've done tons of stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I know you guys are so honest that there was one time where I offered you product. I said, hey, if you need some product for somebody, you're like, hold off on it. Right now, we're okay, but we'll call you. So, guys, if you're looking for a very honest group of people to support and you're looking for a police charity to support, I can honestly say, these guys are honest and they put their hearts behind what they're doing. And I'll put all the information below in the description. So definitely worth checking out at a minimum. That's just the first thing I wanted to bring Josh on for, but we're going to talk about just some other random stuff, I guess, to just get police perspectives on everything going on. There was I know you wanted to talk about the Capitol.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, listen, we had talked about this before, before the election, and what we thought a Biden presidency would mean for law enforcement. And I hate to say everything we said was almost prophetic. I mean, it's all coming to fruition, and you see the Capitol highlighted. One of the things that we had talked about, where inevitably you have the country that's split almost down the middle. You figure 75 million to 80 million voters of the voting age adults in the United States. That's probably about half. It's somewhere in that range. Country's pretty much split right down the middle, and inevitably the cops are going to get stuck in the middle between that. And you saw that highlighted at the Capitol. I mean, that was, before I get to the political hypocrisy of it, it's inexcusable no matter how you slice it. What you saw there was just as inexcusable as any of the violence that we've seen over the last year in the name of politics or outrage or whatever, and for anybody, I don't care who you support, I don't care what side of the fence you're on, for anybody to endorse that violence or to say that, oh, that was necessary, is just as hypocritical as Nadler saying that Antifa is part of our imagination. I mean, that was a disgusting display. But again, you saw now how cops are put in the middle of it, because again, with the amount of law enforcement unions around the country and law enforcement in general that had supported Donald Trump and had supported his campaign, it's not amazing, or it's not a leap to say that the majority of cops were hoping Trump got reelected. So here they are now, probably just as frustrated as any other pro-Trump voter. But now their duty is still to protect, the now president of the United States and the safety of the buildings, just as they would any other time. So, you saw it. They were getting attacked by people. And again, you hear different conspiracy theories that, there's agitators in the group. And I'm sure that's possible. I'm sure there were people that went down there with the sole intent of creating chaos in the name of making Trump supporters look bad. I don't know, whether or not that was the case. For me, having sat back and watched everything that's happened over the last year, you had, again, Chuck Schumer, my favorite guys.
Hey man, you could say whatever you want, because I'm not interjecting my opinion or anything. I just want to give you a platform to be able to get your thoughts out and let people see what police are going through. You know what I mean? From your perspective, just.
Well, it's again, from our perspective, it was amazing. Like, I had gotten worked up on one of the podcasts probably about 2 weeks back or whatever, because again, it's amazing to see the outrage or the collective outrage that came on that day, where all of a sudden now this call to condemn this violence, the call to condemn this, over the top reaction and I mean ridiculous reaction was seemingly universal from people who for the last year have been doing nothing but making excuses for the violence, saying that Antifa doesn't exist or they don't really exist, allowing Chaz to go on for 3 months.
How quickly people forget about Chaz.
Right.
Like, I have conversations with people. They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, there was an autonomous zone. There were women raped in the autonomous zone. There was someone killed in the autonomous. These are things that happened. That's why it fell apart.
And it's amazing to me that, again, I mean, they were, and Schumer himself, speaking in front of the House, speaking in front of Congress, was saying that, yes, of course, the violence, we don't support the violence and endorse the violence, but you have to understand their frustration. Interesting. So now fast forward to what happened at the Capitol. That's where I think the big disconnect is where, of course, I mean, you could say literally the exact same thing then, but they weren't saying that. You could say, hey, listen, we don't endorse this violence. Obviously, this is not something that's acceptable under any circumstances, but we understand the frustration, because that's where the disconnect comes, because you have, what never gets addressed is the fact that you have 75 million people that feel like they're just completely disregarded. And I think that's where that came from. But yes,
maybe more. I mean, those are 75 million people who voted. Who knows how many people didn't vote and still felt one way? You really just can't quantify the number exactly.
And for cops, I mean, it's been so frustrating because, like I said, we've been screaming about this for a year, that this violence is ridiculous. This is not protest. This is not, somebody just, speaking up for rights. No, this is rioting. This is violence. And that kind of stuff has been going on for over a year. I mean, longer, but especially for over a year. I mean, the political season ramped it up. But I mean, really, since Cambridge, this kind of violence, this vitriol towards cops, this destroying of police cars, attacking, precincts. I mean, I remember
setting them on fire. Yeah, precincts were set. Many precincts were set on fire. I can find numerous examples. Even some were boarded up with police inside and set on fire. Pretty crazy stuff.
I mean, I sat there and I still remember, and I'll tell people, it's like, I sat listening to Citywide, which is NYPD's Citywide radio, obviously, and one of the XOs from the 8-8 precinct this is right after the George Floyd incident, when the riots kicked up in earnest in the city. They stormed the 8-8 precinct, and the XO kept calling for help. And, again, like I said, I'm tearing up in my car because I'm far from anywhere where I could render aid to this guy. I mean, I couldn't get there, in time for anything, even if I tried. And he goes on the radio and he says, Central, this may be the last radio transmission I'll ever make. Can I please get help? So tell me, as a police officer, justify to me where the outrage was then for that guy.
No, I mean, it's kind of obvious that the hypocrisy is there. I mean, even in terms of the way that all of a sudden after the Capitol Hill attack, cops were heroes. We're suddenly everyone's like, cops are heroes. Look at these brave cops. We're going to bring them to the inauguration. We're going to, and I was like, wait a minute. For the past 6 months, you're the same people who've been screaming, not only defund the police, but literally abolish the police. The whole reason as a brand I came out was because of the type of rhetoric we were hearing. As a outsider kind of just looking in, who's just trying to say, hey, we should be humanizing each other. There's so much bias, hypocrisy, and I don't think anyone actually cares. I think if they can use it as a tool, they will. And all of a sudden there's good cops when the rhetoric has been, abolish, cops get shot in the head. And how dare you say anything like cops' lives matter? How dare you say that? and that the riots were necessary or they're just a result of pent up frustration. Like you said, no real condemnation. And even then, that there was a mass immediate separation between, well, there are people being violent, fine, they have nothing to do with everyone else, and like they're just there and no responsibility. Those, but then the Capitol Hill attack represents,
it was everybody.
every Trump supporter represents white supremacy, and anyone who sided with them is a white supremacist. I'm like, guys, you have to have consistent standards if you're going to generalize the whole based on the actions of the few. And this is what I saw happening all year to police, generalizing the whole based on the actions of the few. Then at least be consistent and use it anywhere. Then that means that the rioters for the past year who were in part of BLM or Antifa, whatever, represent everyone throughout all that and represent everyone who they vote for, apparently, because if you vote for someone, it means, and there's someone violent who votes for that person too, like Don Lemon now saying, you all supported white supremacy. I don't want to go off on a rant. Like,
oh, it's good. It's
from
good.
A perspective, you know, like yourself, like we've talked, I just wonder how it reads and what's the morale among the police and kind of where everyone's at and all that.
Morale is worse than it was. It's worse than it's ever been because we see what's coming. And it's funny, you know, you said they weren't so quick to say that, you know, after the Capitol attack that cops were heroes. You know, they were still trying to push that narrative, you know, saying that, well, you know, using different instances, different snapshots from different angles, whatever, and say, oh, we'll see if they went light on these rioters because this was a pro-Trump, right? A majority of them were white. They literally shot and killed a woman.
An unarmed woman who was, in all fairness, not even attacking anyone, from what I understand.
Could they have? I mean, and so for somebody to still, in the face of that, say that the police went easy on these rioters, I mean, they were still trying to pull that narrative, you know, and then saying cops were involved.
They did.
Yeah,
They pushed it all over the media. Oh, if these were protesters, and by the way, there were protesters who were people of color. I mean, the notion that, again, you know what it does? Like you said, it puts cops in the middle because it implies cops don't do their jobs. Actually, that's a very negative connotation to put on police. It says cops are racist. That statement, when Biden comes out and supports this statement, and I don't want to get political, but again, I'm just looking at it objectively. I hate that politics is part of this, but if the president or, you know, president-elect comes out and says the reason the police at the Capitol weren't harder is because those people were white, and supports a statement like that, or politicians support a statement like that, that's not helping racial equality. That's saying cops are racist. That's your statement, that they're racist, and if you were a different skin color, they would attack you, and you're just inciting fear. You're vilifying the police further. So it's interesting. I didn't think about it that way until this moment, that's actually a negative statement toward police. It's not really a statement about living in a racist society.
Correct. No, I mean, and you know what? It's funny you say you hate to get political. You really have no choice anymore when it comes to law enforcement. You know, Sheriff Clark made that point, and he says, you know, we're supposed to be apolitical, but we're dragged into this now. We have no choice because the rhetoric coming from the far left for the past year has been so pointed at law enforcement. I mean, again, you saw, you know, when NYPD had endorsed Donald Trump, Pat Lynch had said, he goes, and I forget what year it was, like 1970 or something was the last time, 72 was the last time that they endorsed a political candidate for the office of president. They just don't get involved in that kind of stuff. Because again, law enforcement, for the most part, we should be apolitical, but you really had no choice. And it's going to be, I mean, Biden, for the majority of his 40 years or 47 years, however long he was been around politics, especially though when he was vice president, he's always been an advocate for law enforcement, which is the irony of all this. He's actually done things as vice president, you know, single-handedly intervening in things that to benefit law enforcement. So it's only recently that he's found himself at the front of this.
Well, just because the political, I was actually, for years, I was the guy who would have heavily supported someone like Biden. You know what I mean? I actually felt like he was a down the middle kind of guy.
Yep, well, he was
the law and order kind of guy.
Mhm.
I'm not a fan of his crime bill, but I will even defend that at the time the crime bill came out, in all fairness, people were for the crime bill, and it wasn't just Biden. I mean, I always rag on the crime bill. I think it's
Mhm.
VP for 8 years. He could have turned it around. He didn't have to wait for Trump to come and talk. But again,
Right.
I'm not a hater of either side. I want to see what's best for the country.
Right.
And it's just interesting to see how, there's such extremes now that he can't even kind of control them. And he has to come out and start. When you look at his whole political career, they wasn't really the type of person he was. It's even interesting. As a company, we've put out 3 very strong messages, right? We put out one supporting masculinity. We
Yep.
put out one humanizing police and supporting police. And we put out one supporting freedom of speech and freedom in general, the concept of freedom. We've also done a couple of very pro-America videos, but in terms of stances, those are the 3 stances we've taken. Because my company has taken a stance humanizing and supporting police, supporting masculinity, and supporting freedom of speech, we've been labeled a far-right company. I get hate mail.
Imagine.
Just for fundamental American, and these are not things that up until recently were politically divisive. To say, hey, men, there's a lot of beauty in masculinity. Hey, there's a lot of wonderful things that police do. Hey,
Yep.
our ability to have freedom of speech is not something we should just shut down. And yet now it's entirely political. Foundational
It's
American principles are now, or even just basic ideas that you can humanize each other instead of vilifying each other, are political. And man, police being caught in the middle of it is scary because there's no winning for you guys.
like I said, we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. At this point, and the restraints on law enforcement. If you look at some of these bills that are coming out around the country, these reform bills, as they're called, the restraints being put on law enforcement, the expectations of being put on law enforcement are just they're so counterproductive. They're going to get cops killed, and they're going to get people killed. They're going to get civilians killed. You heard it in Pat Lynch's voice. Was it last night when they had the police officer shot, another one in NYPD, another one shot in the back. And Pat Lynch was at the hospital, and he says, everybody keeps, trying to come up with these master plans at how to fix the problem. Everybody wants to reinvent the wheel, I think was the phrase that he used. And because when we all know what you have to put cops on the street, and you have to let cops do what cops do. Like that's how you solve the problem. Stop demonizing them, support them, prosecute the crimes when they bring them in, and put cops out on the street.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, everything that people are doing in the sake of helping the situation with police when these tragedies happen has the opposite effect, because by vilifying a group, you just increase anxiety within the police force, and you also increase anxiety in the population. People become very scared around police right now. These videos that come out, and we've talked about some of these videos, but it's like a family and the mother's telling the daughter, like a cop, if a cop comes and gets you, like, what are you going to do? And she's sitting there crying. She's like, I don't want you to die. I don't want my brother to die. Like, that level of fear is so extreme there that it's also going to have a level. Now police are very scared. You're telling police you're not even allowed to do this anymore. You're not allowed to mount the person. You're not allowed to do a rear naked choke. As someone who has done martial arts for 25 years, a rear naked choke is not dangerous when done properly, and it's safer than virtually anything else you can do to someone who's being on PCP and attacking you or whatever it may be. A rear naked choke will shut them off, and it won't cause any permanent damage.
It's what it is, Elon, and we've talked about it before, but it's so true. The problem or the disconnect with that is that the majority of these guidelines, the majority of these standards and these bills are being drafted, introduced, designed by people that have never had they've never gotten punched in the face. They've never had to look at somebody 3 times their size and say, you know what, you're under arrest, just to have that person ball up their fist and go, not today. Now what? Now what do? You're going to call a social worker? You got a job to, as a police officer, you're sent to do that job, to enforce that law. You've just told this guy that he's now under arrest, and he says, nah, 3 times the size of you. What are you going to do now? You can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. And the problem is, again, the people that are, trying to come up with these, master solutions for what they're deeming systemic racism, systemic problems that have plagued law enforcement, which in itself is ironic, because if it's systemic, the Obama White House had 8 years of a black president, 2 black attorney generals, 2 years of control of the Senate, and 2 years control of the House, 6 years control of the Senate, and not one crime reform came out of the Obama White House. So it's amazing how systemic it was when they clearly didn't think so, because not one reform came out of that. If there ever was an opportunity, if they felt like that was really been a problem that's been plaguing the United States, that they had not a great opportunity then to do something with that, and they didn't do anything with it. So even that notion, there's so much hypocrisy, and it's honestly, like I said, you ask where cops' morale is. I mean, it's down, because there's no limit right now to the grab from the other side. They are taking from law enforcement and stripping law enforcement down to pretty much nothing. And my fear, because again, you say everything is cyclical, and I agree with that, and I was talking to an old timer the other night, and he had said, you hear every cop that has come on, no matter what, if you could be 20 years retired now, when you came on this job, there was a senior guy that was telling you, kid, the job's dead. The job's dead. It's going away, and had his reasons, because again, the job is dynamic. It's going to change as time goes. The job that you come on to as a rookie is not going to be the same job that you leave. So obviously, on their way out, they're looking at what they have now, and it's not what they had then. Like, kid, the job is done. The job's dead. So you hear that now, but I feel like, so, I mean, it is going to be cyclical. It is going to come back. But my fear, though, now is with how hard the left and how hard these reforms are going after police and how far they're stripping them, is that when it does come back, the level of violence and chaos that's going to have been accommodated, I mean, you are going to see third world style policing. It's going to have to come back so aggressive that you're going to see cops in military type gear with long guns. That's how it's going to come back. And that's what scares me, because that's not the United States.
Militarized police is not what anyone wants.
That's not the United States, but you're going to see that.
If it gets bad enough, I mean, if escalations in the country in general keep happening, because it seems like neither side can talk to each other anymore, which I'm hoping the podcast, this little podcast we're doing on my company, at least gets people to hear the other side, whether they want to agree or not. I'll bring people from both sides of the argument or both sides of the political spectrum on here. I want to share everyone's voice. I'm a kind of solution driven person. And I would say, just everyone watching, something a lot of my friends and I have started doing is, if you see a police officer and you want to support a police officer, just walk up to him and be like, hey, officer, I just want to say thank you, or buy them a cup of coffee. Small things. It's surprising how far it goes nowadays, just because they do genuinely feel vilified. And so when you do it, you'll see a strong response, and it'll make someone's day. It'll make someone's week, just to hear thank you. Hey, officer, thank you for what you're doing. I just want you to know I support you. It's surprising how far that goes.
It absolutely will. Listen, don't underestimate. You say, this little podcast. I always tell people, don't underestimate the power of the individual. We've talked about your company and the stuff you've done specifically for our charity. I mean, the way you've changed people's lives. So don't say this little podcast, because you will have an impact. You know what? And even if you only change one person's mind, that's one less person that's out there. And you're right. It's not even so much the agreement that you should be looking for. It's the discussion. We have to get back to that point of peacefully disagreeing. That's okay. That's what makes this country what it is. We're not all going to agree. That discord, that disagreeing is what makes this thing the way it is.
Well, we should be able to agree that the path forward is to humanize. I think, like, again, if we notice that a group of people is being heavily vilified, whether that's police, whatever that may be, that, hey, maybe the end result, it was interesting, not to bring it back to the masculinity thing, but when I made that video, a lot of people attacked me, surprisingly guys more than women, saying, oh, you're putting down women. You just don't care about women's issues. And there's never a mention of women in the video, right? Every video attacking men mentions women and attacks men. This was a video simply celebrating masculinity and showing some of the things the guys go through. And watch it if you haven't. It's called What is a Man? It's on our channel. It's a good video. So
Dude,
anyway,
it is.
But the reality is what they didn't notice is that by lifting up men and supporting men, you also lift up and help women. That if you have so by lifting up and supporting police, you know, even if you currently hate police, by lifting them up and supporting them and being like, guys, I know it's tough, just having a humanizing approach, what you end up doing is reducing the likelihood of that officer having a negative confrontation with either you or with someone else, because you are seeing them as a human, and which is what they are. Police are not perfect. They do an incredibly difficult job, but we need to start having positive conversations with each other.
Well, I mean, it's again, it's. I think, like you said, if we're gonna have to, have a core set of things that we can agree on. Let's all agree. I mean, I don't think it's that far fetched to say that law enforcement, you know, our military first, but law enforcement is the backbone of the freedoms that we have. Without law enforcement, if you take law enforcement out of the equation in the United States, you have no freedoms. Yeah. You have no freedoms. You have whatever the opportunist or the criminal next to you is allowing you to have.
Yeah, you have chaos.
So law enforcement is the backbone of that. You know, and if we can't even agree on that, I mean, then yeah.
Which we couldn't. I mean, those were and that's scary to me. That's where I kind of, when I came
right.
I put out the video and I really took a hard stance with the company, it was because I was at the point where conversations I was having, and people have kind of turned back a bit, which I'm quite fascinated by, but I always say, you guys were saying abolish, not just defund. You guys were, I heard you out there saying, you know, kill cops. I heard you out there. These are, you know, people I know, and I was coming down on them hard. All of a sudden you're saying, well, it's not really about abolishment. It's about taking money from the police force and putting it toward men. I'm like, why do you keep shifting? Just be honest with what you want.
Do you ever really look at how much of your tax dollars goes towards, especially on a local level? Go look at how much of your local tax dollars goes to public safety. It's pennies on the dollar. It's pennies on the dollar. You can't take much more from law enforcement. You know how many, again, especially on local levels, how many local police departments have, I mean, they don't have the money to hire cops. Mm-hmm. They have nothing. I mean, you can't take much more.
And even police for PTSD for police and all this stuff that you claim you want to reduce negative encounters with police officers while also defunding them. Aren't those two contradictory to each other? When you put more money in to programs that help with mental health, to programs that help with community outreach with police, all the things that you should be doing to like bridge communities and police, bridge the traumas that many officers go through that are widely underfunded. I mean, I've worked with people who are now in that space, PTSD with police. It's fascinating the number of police officers who have PTSD. It's fascinating how little of it gets treated, little of it gets attention. And so we're saying, well, let's defund. What do you think the end result of that is? Is it a better police force, or is it like, which is what you claim the problem is, that police aren't, you know, doing, that they're racist, that they're not doing the right job? When you put more money in to helping these problems that you believe exist. So for me, you can't claim that you believe all these things exist while also simultaneously saying we should defund it. It's contradictory.
Dude, I'm telling you, Elon, that's the hypocrisy has been the heaviest thing. But again, when that hypocrisy goes unchecked, you know, that's why the morale is as bad as it is, because you're sitting there as a police officer, you're like, well, how far down this rabbit hole do we go? You know, where does it end? You know, at what level is someone going to say, all right, wait a minute, hold on a second? You know, even like with AOC, when they first took that huge chunk of change from the NYPD, she came out and said, no, it's not enough. That's not what we want.
Yeah, you know, she's also calling for people to be in re-education camps. Don't get me started. And people still defend it. You know what I mean? Like that's the problem we're having, by the way.
You got to give the left credit. You got to give them credit with that. They stand by each other. If they have not come out there and just said, listen, this bartending woman over here is crazy, and they haven't said it, they'll be like, oh yeah, well, you know, no, we don't really agree with that, but they won't abandon her. The left, you give them credit, man. They will stand by each other and they'll toe that line.
I wish people had less party loyalty and more loyalty to truth, to policy. I can compliment either side when they do something right. And I'm sure there will be things that Biden will do, which I will compliment. You know what I mean? I don't care. I want to see what's best for the country. Our passion should be for the country, not for our political party. It's just so weird to me that I can talk to someone and have these conversations about, hey, maybe this war that we had was bad, but because it suits their political preference, they're like, no, there was reasons for it. And then I'm like, well, what about the 5 peace deals in the Middle East under Trump? You know, a place where my family's from. This is personal to me. I actually very much care about that. And the response is, no, those peace deals won't last. Those peace deals are bad because of. I'm like, so a war in the Middle East is good because of, and peace in the Middle East is bad because of. The second anyone watching this who actually has had that conversation with themselves where they're saying war is good and peace is bad because of their political bias and can rationalize it, just like, you know, Biden now doing the EO to get rid of the insulin, the lower prices on insulin.
Yeah.
He put a halt on it to put it under review. And people are like, well, it's just to be under review. Well, that's normal procedure for a president. It's not normal procedure, by the way, to examine every EO and then pass 19 executive orders on there. These are not normal things. Again, it's not political. We should all be able to come out and say that lower cost for diabetes medication is a good thing. I'm totally off topic.
No, it's honestly,
and I'm like, why can't we all agree on some things that are just absurd?
The wording that you used is Tulsi Gabbard was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and that she said almost verbatim exactly what you had said, the same thing, that when are we going to get to the point where all of these people's energies, the both sides, where all these energies that we've thrown into these protests and these riots, when are we going to throw that energy into what's good for everyone?
How much money worth of damage was there in these? That could have we're in a pandemic. That could have fed people.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That's crazy to me. All that defunding the police, that money that we had in the riots could have gone to helping communities, could have, instead of hurting communities. So again, I mean, I have my own apprehensions about this stuff. I get crazy about it.
Well, no, listen, you can't get crazy. And listen, they want to talk about defunding the police. I got news for you. All these riots and all these protests, all you did was create tons of overtime. So you might want to have defunded them, but you actually cost more money by doing all that. So yeah,
Antifa is still going crazy with Biden as president. And now now Biden doesn't like it because he's president. He's going after Antifa. All of a sudden, Twitter is deleting Antifa accounts.
Now,
2 days after Biden is sworn in, all of a sudden Antifa accounts are worthy of censorship. It's just weird to me.
That's what Crenshaw had said when all the stuff kicked up in Portland again. He goes, all right, he goes, now Trump is gone and Antifa is still up to what they're up to. Can we now acknowledge them for what they are?
Well, they are. Okay. All of a sudden they're saying, okay, Antifa is bad. It's just, but again, it's that hypocrisy that you couldn't just agree before Biden was president. Antifa was just an idea. After Biden's president, they're being censored, they're being targeted. He's putting more efforts toward getting rid of them. I mean, we just have to, as a country, stop side. It's not about our politicians. It's about us on a human level, your neighbor. That's who you should be talking to and caring about, not listening to your politician or CNN or whatever, Fox. I don't care what news station, having them download into your brain and then put it out into the world. That's not the way to live your life. And that's why, hopefully people like you coming on and just showing, hey, I'm a human being. I have opinions. You may disagree with them. I'm doing the best I can, which I know you guys all are.
It's tough, man. It really, really is tough. And again, I don't know what the answer is. I hope that what we're saying, and what we're hoping for, that the politicizing, ends. I don't see an end to that, because where does it end when Biden is mentioning white supremacists in his inauguration speech, in 2021 in the United States? Is there racism in the United States? Yes. Is the United States a racist country? No. Anybody that disagrees with that, you're crazy. I sit there, I think it's Ben Shapiro had always said, if you want me to believe that the United States of America now is worse than it was pre-civil rights, well, tell me when that happened and tell me exactly how.
Mm-hmm. Show me the racist laws is what he always says.
I blew my daughter's mind the other day, my millennial teenage daughter. I said, there are 167 countries. Let me say it again. There are 167 countries that still have legalized slavery.
Really?
Slavery defined as, India being one of the top ones. I think it's like 8.4 million. Slavery defined as a human being property. 167 countries still. Where's the outrage for that? And that's not just any skin color or any. That's all races and sexes. The non-discriminatory slavery. That's still going on in the world. This place is the greatest country on the planet. If it wasn't the case, you wouldn't have people still risking life and limb to get here. And I think honestly, maybe that depoliticizing comes when people start to focus on that a little bit more, like how great we have it here. And we really do. You see the joke picture, the meme that floats around. It says, America, the only country that's so great that even her haters won't leave. It really is. I think if we start focusing on that and realizing all the advantages and how wonderful, this country is, maybe, hopefully then.
Well, you need everyone to agree on that core fundamental. You're right. If we don't have that fundamental agreement, if we don't have the fundamental agreement, like you said, that police are the line between chaos and order, if we can't agree even on that, then there's nothing to agree on.
And it's hard. It's hard because you look at somebody and again, we keep circling back to politics, but people have to realize, it's just what it is at this point. You have somebody like Ilhan Omar. This is a person now in Congress. This is a person running the United States. They're having a say in how the United States was run. Go watch, Black Hawk Down, and the operation in Mogadishu, and put yourself in that position and, living in that Somalia, living in that version of Somalia, and realize that Ilhan Omar was, and she was a teenager at that time when they were dragging U.S. soldiers down the street with such hate for the United States.
Yeah. Oh no, she came out and said abolish the police.
If you want me to believe that is not somewhere in her core, and the now irony that she is sitting in a position to have say over how the United States is run.
I don't judge Ilhan Omar because of where she's from. I judge her because of the policies she's trying to push and the things she says. Her history might be the reason for it, but she hasn't done anything to. Again, I don't want to. I'm going to cut it off there because she made some blatantly anti-Semitic comments, and again, they were heavily defended, and they couldn't even pass a bill that was just for anti-Semitism. They had to include all hate and make anti-Semitism 37 on the list and take Ilhan Omar's name out of there. There's just such hypocrisy. But again, we have to sadly find fundamental things we can agree on, or we're headed for a very scary civil war.
Nah. Listen, honestly, again, I think it does start with, I think like you had said and suggested, simple acts, small acts,
and nobody wants a civil war. That's the honest truth. That should be the last thing that we as a country are headed toward.
No good comes of that, but taking care of your neighbor, like you suggested, is simple. And you are 100% right that, a simple thank you, that's what I always joke around. Cops run on caffeine and thank yous. That's pretty much what it is.
You can stop a civil war.
Yeah. Problem solved. That's it.
No, I don't think like I said, I really don't believe we're there, but the Capitol Hill thing was scary.
Yes.
There's escalations on both sides. And it's like, guys, everyone just take a breath.
Yep.
And so anyway, so if you want to check out the charity again, that's Brothers Before Others, and I'll put the information in the description below with the website. Please support Josh. Please support his charity. He's a fantastic guy, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Elon, and thank you for everything you do again, especially through your company, everything you do for the charities out there, specifically ours. I can testify firsthand to your generosity, and not just that, the bravery that you have doing stuff like this. It takes broad shoulders, man. And to be risking not just your reputation but your livelihood by saying these things, which, like you had said in the beginning, are not really radical ideas, but for some reason they fall down. That it's impressive. It's impressive, and we see it and we recognize it. And we're not alone. There's a lot of people that recognize it. And like I said, don't ever undervalue what you're doing, and please stay after it, because you're one of the few that do. Please stay after.
I'm never stopping. Yeah,
Attaboy.
I'm in it.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.